we're opening it up. Go ahead.
Hi, this question is for Amy and Emily. As both of you talked about writing about your families, and I know, Amy, in your book, you talked specifically about how your husband did not really want to be a character very much at all in your novel, I mean, in your memoir. So I'm wondering how you navigated with your families the role they would play as characters in your work. I'm currently a lawyer. I'm also a part-time blogger working on a memoir, and my families and my significant other have both been like, great idea, we support you, but we don't want to be in the book. And I'm sort of like, how am I going to do that? You know, not quite sure how I'm going to write about, my background growing up without talking about my siblings, or how I'm going to write about my current love life without talking about my current love life. So if you have any suggestions or ideas, or just your experiences doing that and navigating that with your own families, I'd appreciate hearing it.
Emily and I actually talked about this. This is one of the ways we became friends, because I had a crisis. This is well before the book was published. I wrote this thing. I thought it was so funny. I showed it to some friends. They all liked it. And then when I got a publisher, then a very close friend of mine said, called me and said, look, I don't want to interfere. I've known you for, how much I adore your family, but I'm really worried. I think maybe you should wait until Lulu, the second one, graduates from high school before you publish this. And I just completely panicked. I had, of course, cleared before I went out with the manuscript. I had asked my kids. I would never do anything just the way that I am without the approval of my entire family, not just both daughters, my husband, but my mother and father and my 3 sisters. So it was something that my family had really been enthusiastic about. But what my friend said was, your kids are not adults. That's not valid consent. They're 14. What will they think 5 years? So, and I just, I don't know why I hadn't kind of thought about it that way. And I called all these people, and I pulled together old friends, and I had a meeting with Emily, who was the expert in the neighborhood, so in the end, it's a really tough question. I could not imagine this firestorm. And I guess and I'm still worried about it. All these, this is, I would say this is one of the better things that's happened to me. After this whole thing exploded, I thought, oh my God, I remember just being so lonely those first 2 weeks in January where, I go up, the Wall Street Journal thing comes out, I'm getting like 1,000 emails a day. I go on, my first TV thing was with Meredith Vieira, Today Show, 6 a.m., in front of 2 million people. Her first question to me is, yes or no, are you a monster? And so I thought, oh my God, I remember I was far away from my family. It is because of my hubris, is my family gonna fall apart? What are my kids gonna, and that was one nice thing that happened. I couldn't believe it. Both my kids have been incredibly supportive, sort of almost their friends and teachers have kind of come around it, and we've had some struggles, believe it or not, and they keep shifting. My daughter, Sophia, she had warned me before, Mommy, America loves a rebel. They're all going to love Lulu. They're all going to say that I'm the obedient one and be against me. And that is actually what happened. There are actually Lulu fan clubs out there. But Sophia is sort of aligned with me somehow. So this horrible stuff on the web, especially initially, was all about how Amy Chua's daughters are going to be, mentally ill. They're going to be robots. And Sophia wanted to respond because she's of that generation, the internet generation. She wants to go on Mommy Confidential College, whatever, all these things that I don't know about, and respond. But my husband and I wouldn't let her because it was so vicious. I said, no, you can't go out there. You're just going to be. And that was a constant negotiation. Finally, when she was asked to write the op-ed for the New York Post, and then the last thing I'll say, and this is not a direct response, it's just that I'm struggling with this all the time. Last month, she announces to me that she wants to start her own blog. She announced to me that she has started her own blog. Thank you, but and so the upside of it is that it's evidence against this kind of false dichotomy, which is if you're a strict parent, you're going to raise somebody who is meek and obsequious and can't, because her blog, I can't control her. She's very independent. And so far, so good. She's out there. But it is this, I do feel I dragged my family into this whole thing, so it's not really my ability. She's 18. She has to be able to say what and it is very hard. It is very harder than I expected because I didn't expect it to be so public. So,
I just wanted to say that Amy's daughters really are lovely, graceful people. I feel like so many people have asked me in the last few months the question about your kids, kind of wanting to hear some bad thing about them, but it just, I don't know. I don't think it's there to be said. Just to back you up on that. You know, my husband does not really like the family writing I do. He vets everything that I write about the kids. He has vetoed whole columns after they've been written and I haven't run them. And he has taken out different paragraphs. We had a clash over a piece I wrote about my younger son's fingernail biting, where Paul said, you know, I really think that he doesn't need to have that out there. And so I ended up running the piece, but with a lot of excisions. And I have actually, my kids were little when I started this column. I think they were maybe like 3 and 6, something like that. And so they weren't reading it, and it wasn't really a factor in their lives. And then people started bringing it up once in a while, and they had some sense of themselves as, you know, as known in this way, and it started to make me a little uncomfortable. Not because I've written things that I don't want them to read, but just because I think it's sort of an odd experience to grow up as a character to other people. And so I have actually, for the moment at least, stopped writing about them. I don't promise to never go back to it. You know, they could, again, become fodder in some way. But I started to get uncomfortable with the level of exposure in this weekly sort of way where I would be looking for ideas and, you know, maybe we would make a mistake and let something go through that they would regret. And it also, as my older son, who's now 11, started going online, you know, in a minor way to check the Red Sox scores. I didn't want him to go online and read a column and then read all the really mean comments about it. It just seemed like he wasn't old enough to really be able to deal with that. It didn't seem quite fair to him. And I don't know, maybe I'll change my mind about it again. But for right now, it feels to me like the safer thing is to, you know, let them grow up. And that also the dilemmas they have in the age they are now are to write about them honestly would be to expose them more. You know, it's one thing to talk about one's own hang-ups, like, you know, whether the peanut-free environment at the school is, you know, goes too far, and so you as a parent are stuck not giving peanut-free snacks when you should have, a column I got lots of criticism about. And then it's another thing to write about, you know, your kids and their friendships or their questions about sex. So for right now, I'm kind of ceasing and desisting.
Any other comments? If you don't want to come to the microphone, you can raise your hand. I'll repeat your question for you.
Just want to thank all 3 of you guys for great discussion and how well you tied it all together, and wanted to kind of focus in on what I think everybody kind of brought up, which is the idea of role models and the expectations that we all live under, and how you guys play a role as role models for us, for parents, for women now in your new professions, and how you can guide that. I guess most specifically, I worked in a law firm, much due to you. I've now been out for 5 years in probably what is the only less hospitable environment, which is an investment bank. I have 3 boys who are 9, 6, and 3, and I FedExed breast milk from Spain home for my 2nd child. Because of these expectations that we have to do it all, because we have to be 1950s mothers, and we have to be successful lawyers and writers and bankers. And at least when I was in a law firm, I found the women to be the most difficult to work for and the least understanding. And that may be changing because I've seen friends of mine now become partners, and I would hope that they're different. I don't work for them, so I don't know. But in an investment bank, I've not found many role models of women who have successfully done both and are willing to tell you how to do it or be helpful about how to do it. And so you get stuck in this, you have to be the perfect mother and you have to be the perfect banker or writer or lawyer. And there's not a lot of people to look up to. And so I want to know how each of you, and any of you can respond, view your writing as somehow creating new role models for us and helping so that, I mean, I think if anything, I'm creating a bad role model for my own children, because what are they seeing? Somebody who's trying to do everything. And so do they think they're going to have to do that? And is there some way to escape this have it all, do it all situation?
Well, I opted out early for that exact reason. I was working at a large law firm in New York and Los Angeles, and I realized there were no grown-ups there that I wanted to grow up and be. It was as simple as that. There weren't any women who were managing to, this horrible word called balance, right? There was no one who I could imagine, emulating. And so I opted out early. And I've read a lot of articles recently about how women often make a decision about, how they're going to balance career and family long before they realize they're doing it. And that happened to me. I quit law to become a novelist. And looking back, part of the reason was because I wanted to have a job in which I could spend time with my child. And I didn't see how I could do it at the law firm. And I made that decision without even realizing I was making that decision. I mean, it turned out to be a great decision because I love what I do. To answer your question about being a role model, I have never once even thought of myself in any way as a role model at all. So I hadn't even occurred to me. I mean, I often guide writers who are looking, to start a career, and I'll help them, but I don't see myself as a role model, and certainly not as, a mother who's balancing it. About 10 years ago, when I was in law school, I remember very clearly going to a panel just like this one. And a woman on the panel, towards the end actually, made the point that she had a stay-at-home husband. And the whole room kind of shifted for a moment, because we all were like, you're cheating, right? And I fully support stay-at-home husbands, but I think it all occurred to us that, we might not be so lucky. And I kind of feel like sitting here right now, I'm kind of cheating, because I don't have the issues of balance that a lot of people have. I have full-time childcare with my mother-in-law, so I don't even have to pay for full-time childcare. And I have a completely flexible career, so if my daughter needs to go to the doctor, I can take her. And so those 2 days off that I made such a big deal about, it really affected my work and the book I was writing. But I didn't have to call a boss. I didn't have to miss a meeting. And so I feel a little bit uncomfortable sort of preaching about balance when I don't have to. And I don't think the answer is that we should all go become writers, obviously. I mean, I think the answer is we need to find a way for, women to move up in the ranks in law firms and provide these role models.
By the way, my pediatrician allows to be done the same day, but you can't have all 3 kids on the same day.
Ridiculous, right?
I don't know why.
Oh my God. I'll just be very brief and a sort of indirect response. It's funny again, I am somebody who feels like my book has been very much misunderstood, by people who haven't read it. And just tapping into this perfectionism conversation, it pains me because it's sort of, I think if you don't read the book, you feel like, okay, this is exactly what is the problem. This is like all the A's, the violin, the Carnegie Hall. It's about perfectionism. But it's so interesting for me, the difference between how I intended my book to be received, what I thought it was. Because I feel like my book is all about imperfection. It's about making mistakes. It's about me coming in very strong. This is the way we do it, smugger than most people, and just being so burned and kind of having to backtrack. And even the individual dialogue, I feel like it's really about, we're all talking about the same thing. These kind of, I keep using the word zany, and you said, it's just work and kids and everything else can just be okay or barely okay. That's really how I experience it. So the lines in my book are, my daughter will say Mommy, you remind me of Lord Voldemort. I mean, that's not a perfect mommy situation, or, she's insane again, or, she's foaming at the, and so it's a very, me, so that's, in terms of just role models, I again never thought of myself as a role model. I mean, but I do get this question from my students, and maybe just to take a little bit, one thing that a lot of my students say, and this is the biggest compliment for me, and I just say it because my co-panelists are so funny. But I remember a lot of my women students say, there's women professors aren't as funny at the law school, or like the humor. And I think humor has got to be, I don't know, I have this inchoate idea about humor as the sort of saving thing, and just even in being a role model as a law professor, it's actually that I am more interested in conveying, that it's a very again, it's sort of indirect, but being able to kind of laugh at yourself. It's a little bit like when we said the mommy on mommy hate wars. It's just kind of loosen up a little bit, have a little bit more fun with these things, but it's a very imperfect answer too.
I wonder if anyone thinks of themselves as a role model. It's such an odd identity to assume. I don't either, but I do in my work for Slate and in the teaching I do with law students, think about trying to promote, to help them along the way in a way that will serve their interests and promote the kind of work I wish there were more of. And so one thing I do is I do find with opinion writing that there are fewer women who put their ideas out there in a strong and forceful way without some coaching and some encouragement. And so I will sometimes take more time as an editor with a submission from a woman that has a really good idea in it, but isn't necessarily written in the kind of feisty, argumentative way that we like Slate pieces to work in. And I was actually really gratified. I taught a seminar at Yale this spring about writing for writing non-legal sort of writing, an op-ed, the kind of writing that I do and like to read. And most of the students in the class were women, which I really enjoyed working with them on. The other way in which I think about this question has to do with raising feminist men and, having a culture in which the choices that we make are less determined by gender. I mean, it seems to me that if having a stay-at-home husband wasn't such an odd fact that it silenced a room, then that would change the valence of all these kinds of choices and just kind of let everybody take a deep breath and think about their choices in a different way. So that's something I think about. And before the next question, I apologize. I'm going to have to run out in a few minutes because of a recent death in my family, and I have to run and take the train to Washington. So I just want to thank everybody. It's been really a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for coming.